All right, data interview conjunction for aircraft selection. Nathaniel Nicholas, Avia-360. Interviews. So when conducting my interviews, I asked the key travelers what they felt was best for scoring different aspects of the aircraft data. What I found was quite simple. The main factor people associated this new aircraft with was for the ability to do the job that needs to be done, meaning the range, payload capacity being the highest scores, and following this was the cabin. People want to be able to work and bring the necessary people on board. So as we see the subcategories and the weight factors for each one. Starting off with the purchase price, this was kind of the middle ground. People didn't want to spend a whole bunch of money on initially purchasing this aircraft. It's kind of a risk. First time getting into on-demand travel instead of just flying through the airlines. The age and the value factor weren't super big for the key travelers, but they did consider them and they did look at them. Cabin volume, like we talked about here, they wanted to bring the right people and get the job done with the right people. And simply having a smaller aircraft with not as many seats means that you can't bring the necessary people on board to get the job done. Wing loading, they considered this as well, but it was not a big factor. Payload with max fuel and range with max payload, those were the two big ones. As they expressed, the main thing they wanted to do was use this aircraft to get the job done. And with payload with max fuel and range with max payload, those two definitely are going to solve your problems with getting the job done. Dock per hour for 300 nautical mile trip. They did consider this, but it wasn't a big factor here. And finally, maintenance costs. Maintenance costs was up there with the purchase price. They don't want to just spend a whole bunch of money always fixing this aircraft. They want it to be fairly reliable and not be prone to needing to, be fixed and everything. Moving on to the data. Data collections, finding of aircraft scores. With these four aircraft, the Phenom 300, the TBM 930, the Pilatus PC-12NG, and the Citation CJ3 Plus, I have found the overall scoring of the aircraft are as follows. Total score for the Phenom 300 is 156, the TBM 930 is 126, the Pilatus PC-12NG is 142, and the Citation CJ3 Plus is 130. Putting the Phenom 300 at the top of the list with the Pilatus PC-12 close behind. These numbers we'll look back at here in a second. Final thoughts. To conclude with the information that has been presented, I would like to first start by saying the key travelers have expressed that the aircraft weight factors were put forth for the mission of this aircraft for the company. Secondly, they noted that the aircraft was going to be used primarily for mission purposes. They didn't sacrifice on comfort in the company's checkbook. Next, to summarize the data, the Phenom was the obvious winner for me. With its great scoring and ability to meet mission criteria, although it does come with a cost of a higher purchase price, it made up for it in many other categories. So as we can see, the Phenom 300, the purchase price was roughly scoring 3 out of 12. Compared to the TBM 930 and the Pilatus, that's a little weaker, but it makes up for it in many other categories, such as the value factor. The Phenom 300 had the highest value factor out of all aircraft, and these two combined as well. The cabin volume was the same roughly as the Pilatus, but it beat the TBM 930 and the Citation CJ3 Plus. Wing loading, the aircraft outperformed every aircraft on wing loading. Payload with max fuel, it beat every single aircraft. Range with max payload, it beat every single aircraft except for the CJ3 Plus, which was in a close second. Next was the dock per hour 300 nautical mile mission. Unfortunately, the Phenom 300 came in last place, but it made up for it in several other categories as we talked about. And the maintenance costs. The maintenance costs on the Phenom 300 was roughly the same for the PC-12NG and the Citation CJ3 Plus, and it was just behind the TBM 930. The Phenom 300 makes up for each one of these aircrafts in its own way. First of all, with the TBM 930, I'd like to say it has plenty of more cabin volume compared. For the Pilatus PC-12, this Phenom makes up for it in the max payload capacity with fuel and range with max payload. And finally, the CJ3 Plus, the Phenom 300 makes up for it with the payload with max fuel and the range with max payload, and cabin volume and value factor in all other aircraft combined. So those are my final thoughts. Thank you for watching.